And when you get in front of a human, and you guys all do this, but show that enthusiasm and ability to take initiatives while tackling a problem. And it might be outside your fringe role that's been written up in the job description. So make sure that it's an end of the day, if a recruiter is hiring is talking to 8 people, how do you make sure that you are the one that person remembers when their work is done? If the HR guys are done with 5:30, they should remember, okay, Brad's the guy I really was really impressed with. Unfortunately, it's come down to branding and the interaction part of it. That's something we all need to practice. I also would advise people not only to research about the hiring company, but what industry they are in, what are the challenges facing their industry, their customers' industry. So if you are interviewing with a company that makes wastewater pumps, what are the challenges that company is facing as a manufacturer, and what are the challenges faced by their customers and their industry? So you're showing a deep dive into the role that you are getting into. Not just you're manufacturing, you're making castings for the company, or you're inspecting quality, but how far up can you see within the industry?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Job Seeker's Journey podcast. Up until this point, I've had the chance to talk to recruiters, I've talked to coaches, I talked to an author, I've talked to someone who designed the applicant tracking system for a few large companies here in Oklahoma City, but I hadn't had the chance to talk to a hiring manager until today. Today, I'm speaking with Malay Vyas. I worked with him 12 years ago at a company called We're Pumpin', which was my very first project manager title, to be more specific. It was a really tough job, but it was a really good job. And I met some really great people, including Malay. Malay was in sales. He has a background in engineering. And after I left there, I followed his career on LinkedIn because I really liked him when I worked with him. And I've seen him rise in the corporate ladder to vice president. And now he's the president of the company he's at now. And I was really excited when he volunteered to be the person to speak to me today about being a hiring manager on the other side of the table. I'm really excited for you to hear this conversation. So without further ado, here's my convo with Malay Vyas. All right. Hi, Malay. It's good to see you.
Hey, Brad.
It's one of the coolest parts about doing a podcast or just anything in general is getting to meet up with people that you've known for a long time and that you haven't gotten a chance to talk to, or maybe you just never would have talked to. I mean, shoot, in the course of this podcast, I've had a chance to talk to somebody in Australia that I'd never gotten to meet, and Portland and all these different places, which has been a really cool experience. And this is one because I used to work with you. Gosh, Now we were just talking about it. It was at least 12 years ago.
12 years ago, yes.
Yeah, but you're someone that I've always followed because you always were doing interesting things. And so one of the cool things about LinkedIn is you can follow people that you're connected with, and you're one of those people that I have followed. And when I got to thinking that I was hoping to hear from a hiring manager, because I've talked to a lot of people on the other side.
Sure.
And you reached out to me and said you would be interested. So thank you for that, first of all.
Sure.
But before we kind of get just talking, I'll let you let you have a chance to kind of introduce yourself and what you do. I know you've rose up the ranks. You're now president of the company you're at now, and let you kind of give your background for everyone to know who you are.
Sure. Thank you, Brad. Great to connect here again. It's like you said, 12 years just flew past, right? Yeah, I'm a mechanical engineer at heart, which leads me to a lot of pathways that I followed with simple things that if things are not working, how do we fix them? That's at a mechanical engineer's heart. That's the principle. Not that I've fixed too many things. I don't think so. But at least I would like to think that that's how my career went from being an application engineer to sales, and everything else that followed was what can I fix? And that's what got me to where I am. I came into the US in 2002 as a migrant worker on an H-1B visa. So I had to make myself relevant right away because, in case you are not employed, in case you make a mistake and get fired, you got to pack your bags and go back home. There's no fallback. So it was walking on the edge. I think about it now. Now I'm like, did I actually take that risk 22 years ago to make this big transition? But yes, that's where I am. I live in Houston. It's been home for almost 22 years now. So, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know that about the visa. Is it an immediate thing if you lose your job?
You get a 30-day grace period to pack up your things or find another employer who will file a petition on your behalf to sponsor your work visa.
Wow.
Which is easier in the IT world. I was a mechanical engineer, so kind of difficult in the mechanical engineering field. So yeah.
Wow. Talk about pressure.
It is.
Especially if there's just mass layoffs at a company that you can't control.
Right.
Man, talk about pressure there. That's interesting. I didn't know that, obviously, having always been here. But like I mentioned earlier, so far we've talked to recruiters and coaches and people that have tried to help job seekers from the job seekers' perspective, and try to give them as many tools as they can to try to present themselves well once either to get an interview or once they get an interview. But I always have intended to want to talk to someone on the hiring manager side who does a lot of these interviews and talks to people that are hopeful to find that new job. And so before we kind of dive into the heart of it, I've done this a couple times now and I've really enjoyed the stories, but I was wondering if you had a favorite story, whether it be humorous or kind of cool or whatever it may be, but if you had a favorite story of someone that you have hired over your time of being a hiring manager.
Sure. I've hired people across finance, operations, service, sales. I've hired people where I haven't known anything about their field, but because I was the leader of the organization, I had to make that interview. I'm the first one to admit, I might be a leader, I might be in a role of a president, doesn't mean that we don't make mistakes. Leaders make mistakes, full stop. It happens. It's how you accept that yes, you made a mistake. You're not supposed to be perfect. Nobody is. So sometimes people expect that if you're in this role, you must be perfect. I'm like, not really. It's my mistakes that have gotten me to where I am because you learn from each one of them. One of my favorite stories was I was hiring a high performance sales guy, and we wanted this person to hit the ground running, chase down as many customers as possible, make sure that the brand name is spread out there in a huge territory. And it was basically, we were new in the market, well entrenched by some famous names. And I asked the candidate, so what do you not like about sales? And this guy was very well spoken. I mean, he would have been the ideal candidate. But this one last question, what do you not like about sales? And he said, the fact that I have to sit there and talk to people and try to persuade them. And I'm like, you just broke the branch of the tree you were sitting on. Okay, from there it went downhill because, but I still remember that when you say, okay, you are in sales, but I don't want to persuade people. I'm like, okay, you might as well be giving out freebies, right? So that comes to mind. I often tell this joke to people, and especially teammates when I train them. It's like, this is what I got told. So guess what happened to that candidate? But yeah, that's one I remember.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. We had a guest on few weeks ago, and I asked her a similar one, and she had said that she had a candidate that in the middle of the interview got up, went like on the other side of the room. It was a big conference room, went on the other side of the room, got herself a drink, and on her way back to her seat, started like rubbing the shoulders of the person giving her the interview. and then just sat back down like it was nothing.
I had this one. I had an interview. The candidate flew in, and we had booked a private meeting room close to the airport so that he didn't have to travel. He comes in and sits across the chair, opens up an iPad that he's looking into while I'm talking to him. I know you are a high-tech person, but it's like you're looking at your screen. Is that giving you answers, or why is there an iPad in front of you when you're interviewing? But anyways, yeah. There's been interesting interviews all the time. I look forward to some of those actually.
Yeah, for sure.
What's life without that kind of fun?
Yeah, I mean, you never know what's going to walk through the door. Yeah, you never know who that person is. I mean, what they are on paper could be anything.
I had a friend of mine who used to be a lecturer at some university in Georgia, and he told me that he had a student who he interviewed, and later found out that was Eva Longoria. Huh. Oh, okay. Wow. Life surprises you, so yeah.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, what would you say? Because I always like to humanize both sides of the table. So sure. What would you say is one of the most difficult parts of being a hiring manager and going through the interview process and all of that?
See, especially for me, I tend to I tend to empathize with the candidates I'm interviewing, because I want to see not only the person's knowledge, but how would this person gel with the team, and how would the team accept this person into them? Because I've always been in positions where the team has been small. It's not a billion-dollar company. So that teamwork becomes important, and that is always dependent on how good this person is as a human. If that person is a team member, or that person might be technically the most smartest person on the planet, but he cannot stand an argument with a colleague, then what's the point in hiring that person? So the difficult part is to, and this is something, it's human nature, right? When you are interviewing and you're looking for a job, you always put your best foot forward. You always say, hey, the day is brighter, and you always say something that will appease the hiring manager. But how do you take those layers apart and try to understand how this candidate is as a person? Will this person make a difference to my team? Will that be a positive difference? How well is the synergy that will be created when you bring this person on board? So that and again, it's how you judge that person, and it's difficult to do that over a single interview or over a couple of interviews, especially nowadays where everything's on Teams, and difficult to meet candidates in person. But that's the kind of that is the difficult part. You can look at the resume and you can see that the candidate has worked for a number of companies, has the experience, all the good stuff. But how well do we get to gel? Do we get this candidate to gel with the team? That's a tough part.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's interesting when I think back. Ironically, when I think back to my interview with the operations manager at We're Pumpin' when I got that job. That was my second job ever. I had pretty limited experience as any kind of project manager or coordinator at the time. But I showed good traits to the first person I talked to. And when I went to meet Brian, the operations manager at the time, I remember we were talking about job things. And then somehow he asked me about a hard phone call maybe I had in a previous job. And I told him this story about a guy who had called in with a simple problem to a drive. I was in oil and gas, and he called in with a simple problem like 2 weeks earlier, and he called back like 2 weeks later and just read me the riot act for about 15 minutes. I mean, it got personal. It was like, I think if he would have been in the room, he would have hit me. And come to find out, it was just a simple button he had forgot to press. There was nothing wrong with the equipment. But I told that story, and I think Brian saw that I was able to handle difficult phone calls, not take them personally, and be able to keep my head and things like that. And little did I know that the job that I was going to have there, I was going to have some difficult phone calls with clients, you know, different cultures, different cultural barriers that I had. Most of my clients were in Korea, South Korea, and the cultural barriers made things difficult and stuff like that. So it is I can see how that hiring process can be real difficult, because he was judging something that really wasn't a technical aspect of the job, not whether or not I could keep track of schedules or keep track of where everything was or make reports or any of that stuff. He was looking for something soft, and that was really interesting. But I want to run a couple of scenarios by you, because I am curious how hiring managers think. And I know that this is you. I'm not trying to generalize everybody, but I think that this is good insight to what to try to do as a candidate if you have any idea where you're at in the process. So the first scenario that kind of came to mind is, if you have, we're going to say we're in the final stages of the interviews, you have two candidates, both pretty equal on paper, similar experience, similar things that they've done on paper, meet the job description almost to a T. When you're sitting with those people, and you may have actually already answered this a little bit in the last answer, but what are the traits that you would look for that would make somebody stand out versus the other person that would make you pick that person over someone else in the interview?
Sure. Yeah, you're right. Part of it is how well will this person gel with the organization. It's very important, especially when you're managing small, high-performance teams. That becomes important. The other thing is, I usually run what I call is the pineapple theory, and I heard about this joke many years ago at Road Pump, and through some of our fabulous leaders there's an organization in which there's a 20-year experienced guy and a 5-year experienced guy, and the boss calls both of them into the office and gives a promotion and a raise to the lesser experienced person. So the more experienced person objects, saying, "Hey, why is this junior person getting a promotion and getting a raise?" So the boss asks the senior guy and says that, "Hey, there's a fruit store down the street that sells fruit. Can you go and check if they have pineapple?" And the senior guy runs down to the shop, comes back saying, "Yes, sir, they have pineapple." Then he says, "Can you check if they'll slice the pineapple, cut it into pieces, and serve?" So he goes down, comes back, "Yes, they'll cut the pineapple into pieces and serve." Said, "Okay, can you go and check if they'll sprinkle some salt and pepper on the pineapple. So he goes and asks, yes, they will do that for us. Okay, can you go and check if they'll provide plates and fork for the pineapple? So he goes down again, comes back and says, yes, we plates and forks too. Then he says, the younger guy, can you go and check if the fruit store has pineapple? The younger guy goes and comes back and says, yes, they have pineapple. They'll serve it sliced and chopped. They will put salt and pepper on it and a fork. And by the way, it's $5.99. That is the difference in attitude. Nothing against more experienced guys. I think more experienced, much better. But the attitude or the ability to take initiatives to a problem. A lot of times what people do is, hey, this is what I do and nothing outside this line is my job. And that is where organizations stop growing. You cannot work in a silo. So what we do at what I've done with my teams is, if the team has a challenge, that challenge is taken care of by somebody else in the team. Somebody's challenge becomes somebody's goal. So what I look for in candidates, to answer your question, is their attitude towards the work they do. Are they inherently initiative takers? Or will they wait till the problem hits their desk? And you can make a call which one I would prefer. I would prefer somebody who sees the problem and tackles it head on, or takes initiatives to solve that problem. So on my team, if you come up to me with a problem, my first question to you would be, what's the answer? If you don't have it, I'll help you find it. But if you have a problem, 90% of the time you have a solution. So that comes from the ability to take initiative, to step up and identify the problem before it becomes a problem and solve it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Your example brought to mind a story my dad used to tell me about when he was a manager, and he was a mechanical engineer as well. And when he would get a fresh batch of new engineers that would come into his team, he liked to kind of run scenarios with them and have them come back to him with a solution. And so he told me a story one time that he did that and gave this scenario and said, hey, come back to me tomorrow with a solution. Sure. And there was like 3 or 4 guys, and each one of them came back with this completely out of the box solution that was going to be really expensive, something they maybe hadn't really ever done before, all these things. And I remember him saying that he used to have to tell them, hey, did any of you guys look in the box for the solution? Because the simplest solution was right there in front of you. Sure. Like it wasn't a trick question. It was like, we would do this and this and this basically. And they wouldn't have to buy new tools. They wouldn't have to train anybody. They wouldn't have had to do anything, but they kept having, and some of this was because they were new and they're excited and they're coming into this. So it is interesting when you hear of things like that. And he was like, guys, I need you to think inside the box first. The out of the box solution is great, but is there a simple solution that we can do real quick? And so I always think of that too, but, okay, let's change the scenario just a little bit. So now we have one guy who has a lot of experience, perfect on paper. And you mentioned this in your example, 20-year, 5-year, but you have a guy who's perfect on paper, lot of experience, maybe had done something similar. And then you have someone else that has made it through the process that maybe has significantly less experience, but has a good personality and has made it to you, and you're the final decision. What's something that would get you to really think about hiring that person with less over the person with more, that would stick out to you to the point to you're like, this is our guy, this is who we want?
Sure.
Those kind of things.
Again, going back to the sales world, right? That's where most of my experiences in sales is. There's a there are two terms that are actively used: hunters and farmers. Uh, and every organization has a set of customers that need to be nurtured and farmed. You don't need a hunter out there. You need somebody with experience to sit across the customer and tell that customer that this is the problem you might have and this is the solution you may want to look at, versus the other person who's energetic and out there getting orders, banging on the doors. That is a hunter. So depending on what the role entails, I would make a call on whether I want a farmer or a hunter. I have been told that no, we only want hunters on the sales team. No, it doesn't work that way. You need to have a balance. You need to have a balance. I mean, I've been in positions where we're calling on the three biggest oil companies in the world. You don't need a high energy. There's nothing wrong with being high energetic, believe me, but you don't want somebody going in, knocking on doors at Exxon saying, hey, where's my next purchase order? You're not doing that there. It's not going to get you anywhere. You need somebody who has experience in the background to be a client partner. So it depends on the nature of the role. What are we trying to achieve with this role? If I have a brand new territory and I want to get to as many customers as possible, I would take the second candidate. But if I have my top 5 customers who are very key to the organization and we almost rely on each other's experience to come up with solutions, then I'll find somebody with more experience. I'll go with somebody with more experience.
Mm.
Yeah. Does that make sense? Yeah.
It totally makes sense. And I'm kind of, and some of this comes from experience of jobs that I've applied for, been in interviews for. Mm-hmm. How have you found that other people that you've talked to that have been hiring candidates is things like job descriptions and things that they put in the posting? Is that something that is thoroughly thought like through a ton? Or is that something that, and I can see you smiling now because I know it can vary. Yes. And I know that sometimes you may be putting something out there quick and you maybe put out generic things to try to get people in and then you decide from there. But have you found that there's much thought put into that, or is it like, kind of a necessary evil to some people?
It's like
that they have to do.
It's like a bag of chips. You don't know how many chips are in there and how much is air. Okay. And a lot of job descriptions these days are used to parse your resume through the software that they're using. Mm-hmm. Because if you were to use those keywords in your resume, even though you may not have relevant experience, your resume will still get through the next level where a human sees it. So as far as the job description goes, I actually, and I've been in positions where over the last few years, I've been in out of jobs. And what I've done is based on the job description, I tried to look at it saying, read between the lines. What else is needed in this job? So my first interview with the HR person has been like, yeah, I see the job description, but what is it that this candidate does in the first 90, 180, 365 days? Get HR to tell you, where does this person fit in? And the ultimate thing is, how is your role connected to the growth of the organization? You know, every person, I mean, these days the organizations are lean, everybody's cutting costs. How does your role connect indirectly or directly with how the company would grow? If you do 120% of what you are told to do, how does that benefit the company? So that nobody puts that in the job description. If your job description is sales or operations, these are the standard. I mean, job descriptions have been written by HR for a number of years. Now it's become AI. A lot of people type up the job description and let AI manage it, and all AI does is change up the grammar and use a few fancy words. But as a candidate seeking the job, when you're getting through that job description, yes, you want to make sure that whatever's on that job description somewhere matches in your resume. Because honestly, you need a human to look at your resume. If you're applying to a company that's going to parse your resume through a software, the keywords would help. But once you get to that first interview phase, one of the key questions you would need to ask is how whatever I do in this role impacts the company. That gives in that you care about what you do for the company. You're just not looking for a job. You want to be a part of this company growing up. I'll give an example. Application engineers in the pump industry. There are application engineers everywhere. But a lot of times when I joined, application engineers would be sitting at their desk churning out proposal, look at P&ID, data sheet, here's the price for the pump, send it up. But when we started in sales, myself and a few other guys at Root Pump, and we started taking our application guys out to refineries to look at those sites. And then we told them, look, that's the pump that you size and how it impacts the rest of the process. And that became very important because now an application engineer sitting at the desk, he or she could see that, okay, if I do this right, this is how step by step it would benefit my organization, customer's organization. So when you talk to an HR person and talk about how this role impacts the organizational growth, you're taking it up a level more, you'll probably get an insight that is not in the job description. Mm. And sometimes HR may or may not be able to answer, but it may get you a little more information about the job.
Yeah. And I think that's been a consistent theme. I've heard you referencing it a few times, and even with recruiters and other people that I've talked to, there's a level of value thinking that a candidate needs to really think about, to especially once you get in front of a human, and hopefully you are able to. And I've had discussions about the AI applicant tracking systems because they're confusing. They're hard to know what keywords they're looking for, and you can have everything in there and you still may not get through and all of those things. But once you get to that stage where you're talking to a human, that thinking about value in a macro and micro term of how you can really help the company out is becoming more and more important, and is becoming a theme that you're hearing a lot of people say to really get yourself to stand out. And in like where our market is now, it is a employer's market right now.
It is. It is.
Because, you look on LinkedIn, within 2 hours of a job being put on LinkedIn, there's going to be over 100 people that's applied to it. And most likely there's 700-800 people. Now, granted, probably the majority of those are, I don't want to call them trash, but they're not qualified for that job, and it'll parse them out. But it's an employer's market, and you have to figure out how to really make yourself stand out. Are you someone that uses third-party recruiting firms?
Yes, we have used a few third-party recruiting firms because, again, there are certain recruiters that specialize in certain industry market segments. And if you're trying to go after, let's say, a competitor's person to come work for you, the connection via third-party recruiters becomes more important. And again, recruiters versus AI, it's a human parsing through resumes versus AI parsing through resumes. And I would trust a human, though, of course, that is an expensive proposition, but at least you cut the noise out. You make sure that of the 1,000 applicants on LinkedIn, for example, you get through the top 5 or the top 10 that might eventually make it to the next round. So yes, I have used a few. I've also come across recruiters that have absolutely no idea what they're talking about, and they still want to recruit for you. They'll send you resumes of people. I've had one recruiter so excited about a position that he sent me 5 resumes, and 3 of them were people who were not interested in the job. They just told me that, hey, I'm here because the recruiter told me to. I'm like, okay, this interview is over. And then 2 of them didn't have updated resumes. But you see, the recruiters also want a piece of the pie. So they'll try to get they'll try to get as many candidates in front of you as possible. And that just doesn't work out. So for hiring managers, know your recruiters. And for job seekers, if you are in a certain job segment, know what recruiters are at top of the game in hiring people. And there's some pump world, there's some excellent people. The first one who comes to my mind is Tom Lample. Tom's been around for a number of years. Okay, and Tom will tell you up front, hey, this job is not for you. If you find something that he's hiring for the third party pump company, he'll tell you that this is not for you. He's pretty honest and frank. So as we go forward in this tough industry, right, as the candidates are on the back seat, try building relationship with recruiters in terms of what are they seeing in the market trend. Let them, even if they don't have a position open, building relationship would mean, hey, can you look at my resume? Any updates? What do you see in the industry? Those kind of things help create that relationship building. End of the day, it's how the recruiter pitches your resume to the client also that matters. So,
has the added cost of a recruiter ever been something you've had to weigh as far as whether or not you can hire somebody? Because obviously, they get a commission off of it.
Yes.
And it can be significant depending on the level of the recruiter and all of that.
It has, but it's one-time payment to make sure you get a candidate that's been validated. Now, do all candidates that you hire through a third party are perfect? No. But your chance of risking hiring a non-vetted candidate is a bigger risk than paying that 20% of the annual salary of your next hiree. So it's got benefits, it's got disadvantages. I mean, if we are in a newer market and something new trending, then we would go with third-party recruiters who have experience in that particular field. So getting again depends on the candidate, right? What are you hiring for?
Sure. Yeah. And that's another one of those questions that comes from experience, because I'm pretty sure that I lost out to, now it was an internal referral, so that adds another element there. But I was coming through a recruiting service and I lost out to an internal referral. And it only makes me wonder about that, because when I asked for feedback to try to improve, if there was something I was lacking in this position and wanting to, learn for the next time, there was zero negative feedback. There was no, like, we were concerned about this, or, you didn't answer this question. There was nothing. And so the only thing that I could deduce was the fee, right? Because, I assumed the position was similar pay range for both people. So,
right. But that's unfortunate.
It's tough, and I really wanted to work there, but I understand if that is something that has to be considered and something to think of.
The only good thing I see about that conversation is you actually got a feedback.
Yeah, which is rare.
9 out of 10 times you are just ghosted. There will not be a reply for a number of months, and it's like, okay, fine, fair enough.
Right.
That's how the nature is. You will always get an email saying we'll get back to you, but nobody does. And
No.
the unfortunate part is that it's been taken so much for granted that it's okay to ghost a non-successful candidate, right? It's a non-successful candidate is still a human who's looking for work. So if you say in your messages or when you end the interview, you'll say, I will get back to you. Do what you said you will do. Doesn't take too much to send an email saying, okay, here's why we didn't hire you or we went with another candidate. Even a simple line that you weren't successful helps bring a closer versus somebody just letting you out hung for to dry out.
Yeah.
And that's becoming more and more of a trend. I see that in forums on LinkedIn and Reddit, people seeking for jobs, and for months to end, people get ghosted. You don't know what to think about. I was in one of my job searches. I was ghosted because company said, "Oh, we are very interested in you. We'll get back to you." The 2 weeks later, they said, "Oh, we're going to take 2 more weeks," and then they said, "Well, we'll get back to you in a month's time." So I was wondering what they were trying to do is they had another candidate that they were trying to negotiate with, and they were holding me up for the number 2 position. So if the first guy doesn't pick it up, take up the job, then I would be the next guy. So those negotiations took a long time. So I eventually, again, small industry, I found out through a friend of a friend that somebody else was talking to the organization. So I backed out. I needed a job, but I backed out. I said, you know what? I would like to withdraw my candidature. And they're like, no, we want to set up an interview again, talk about the offer. I said, no, it's that's what is insulting to a candidate when you are at buying time to negotiate with the other one. So but it's as you rightly said, it's not the job seekers market. So hiring managers, hiring companies do what they wish they want to do, so they just continue doing it.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate, and I so appreciate you saying that, because I actually made an episode just of me where I pretty much pled to everyone, hiring managers, recruiters, and candidates alike, to look at the human aspect of this whole process.
Right.
Because my point to hiring managers, to your point, was, if you get into a second, third, fourth round of candidacy, that candidate wants to work there.
Right.
Like, they're interested.
Sure.
They're invested in wanting to work there. So just giving them nothing is not giving them the courtesy of being a human, because now they're left in limbo.
Sure.
And you may have bills coming up, you may have a lot of things, and now you may have kind of relaxed on other things because you thought, well, I'm in the 4th round of this. Like, I'm pretty deep in. It's sounding really positive. And then you're just left. I mean, I have one that I had a final interview a month ago. And so far, the only thing I've heard is you're still in consideration.
Wow.
But
you heard that. They did come back.
Well, but that was after 2 or 3 emails of me trying to prompt to get something. So it happens, and I really appreciate you saying that. And to be fair, on the candidate side, understand that, especially small to mid-sized companies, you may be dealing with one person who's in HR, probably having to hire multiple places.
Sure.
And they're busy, and this is just a part of their job, and there may not be ghosting you. They just may not have been able to get to it.
Sure. And
so there's a human aspect on all sides of this.
Right. And on smaller and mid-sized companies, the HR person might be doing multiple jobs. Might be, helping out with the finance or doing the invoicing as well as interviewing. So yes, definitely. Good point.
So as we're coming to an end, you mentioned the ghosting, which is definitely a trend that's happening now. And we've talked about AI a little bit. And I know that that's a conversation and contention of both sides of this, in that a lot of candidates don't know really how the applicant tracking systems work.
Yeah.
They're like, gosh, I have everything here and I'm not able to get through. But then on the other side, so they're trying to use AI to crack the AI, and then sometimes they can get counted against because they've used it. But I would also contend that it's most likely that they were a little bit lazy about it and didn't double check it. And, so it may have had like, I did this on this date, but instead of giving a date, it just put XX date, and then they just didn't check it and left that. I'm assuming that sometimes it's obvious if they did that. But are there any other trends that you're seeing in the market for hiring candidates that you've noticed?
On the trends front, right? What I've noticed is there's a lot of focus on, and which maybe I'm old fashioned, maybe I'm 53, so I definitely not a millennial by any length, but there's a lot of self development aspect that job seekers are seeking. I was once asked, hey, how do I benefit from this role? 25 years ago, I wouldn't have asked the hiring manager this question, hey, what's my development in this? So that's becoming more of a trend, because candidates are looking to develop themselves, or actively at least seeking opportunities to develop themselves. Of course, AI is now playing a role in everything. Most of the jobs are being touched by AI one way or the other. So some knowledge on AI, or how familiar you are with the aspects of AI, and think about it, whatever role you might be as a candidate, if you think about, hey, how is AI impacting the role I am in, the company I'm going to apply for, and overall the market this company is, how is AI affecting that? Job loyalty in a lot of ways is gone. People don't stick to, and I shouldn't say, because I've had some changes, forced or unforced, in the last few years, but there's no loyalty to the employer you're working for. A generation ago, people would work for the same company for 30 years, and that has gone. People are looking to move fast so that they make money faster. You're moving up the ladder, you tend to get those raises, but then you're not building a loyalty, which again, loyalty works both ways, right? Loyalty to a company is no good if the company just treats you like a number on an Excel spreadsheet, which unfortunately all of us are. So, but that self-development, and again, a lot of Generation Z, millennials coming into the workforce, training them is different from training 20 years ago. 20 years ago, we would get people into a training room and go through PowerPoints and presentations and say, okay, your training's done. It's different now because people are seeking knowledge different ways. So training is important, but also the training medium and how you enforce that training is important. Nowadays, if you see, companies are coming out with 30-second reels on a product. That's a small bit of training, but it has an impact. So companies need to come out with those kind of training formats. That's another trend that I'm seeing. One of my most interesting, my most I find it very amusing is the format of resumes out there. It's just been, oh man, it looks like designer took a resume class or something like that. Because again, a resume for me is relevant information, making sure that the person who's reading your resume reads it like a story rather than a restaurant menu card. You notice, if you know the difference, right? Uh, these days there are names going sideways and colors up at top, and I'm not sure if the resume layout is there to influence your HR manager. But the data flow needs to be correct. That the basics remain the same. Uh, 25 years ago, people would tell us, "Hey, don't write about what you do. Write about what you have accomplished." Same thing right now. What are you responsible for? What are you accountable for? And what have you accomplished? It's the same thing. It's just that resume formats have become fancier. I've seen some funny ones, including PDF resume with moving texts and things like that. So yes, the resume is interesting, no doubt about it. But
that is interesting.
The basics to seeking a job is what value are you bringing to the table. That hasn't changed, and that won't change, I hope. It's becoming more and more interesting as AI creeps in. You read a resume and you don't know whether the candidate wrote it or this was written by AI, and some words in there are surprising for me as well as being in the industry for such a long time. I'm like, I haven't heard that word before. So
yeah.
That means probably AI wrote it, but yeah.
Yeah. And I think the loyalty point is such an interesting one. I actually just got asked about that. And I know for someone like me who unfortunately has been laid off 3 times, that looks like on paper that I don't have loyalty. And I've been asked about it a lot. In fact, I just got asked about it. About you've been at a lot of places. And the implication of the question, whereas I understand what they're asking, the implication is that I'm someone who's never satisfied and wanting to job hop. But there are some things that don't happen that used to happen when 30 years ago as well.
Sure.
Companies used to really promote their people from within, and that doesn't happen as much as it used to. So a lot of people sometimes have to jump to make a promotion. That happens some, but then like the only way I know to answer that question is I've only left a job once because I was dissatisfied.
Right.
Or I just felt it wasn't a good fit. I enjoyed my time there. It just wasn't a good fit. But I can't control oil prices tanking in 2015, and I can't control COVID happening in 2020, and I can't control the fact that I'm in a right-to-work state where companies don't have to have a reason to just cut ties with you.
Right. And there's a way around it. Go on. Sorry.
No. It's interesting because that's very much determined by who you're talking to on the other side as to whether or not they value that to the point where they're suspicious of you. And, that falls on the candidate to say, okay, if this is the line of questioning that I'm getting now, what is my culture going to be when I get in there? And you have to make that determination too, as a candidate, because it does come down to you have to feel like it's a good fit too. And there's a back and forth there. But I definitely agree. There is a lot of discontentment
Right.
with, especially, and I am one of those dreaded millennials. So
Mm-hmm.
like there is some discontentment there that can creep in and COVID didn't help with that, because people are starting to say like, I work to live. I don't live to work.
Mm-hmm.
And like, all these things. And but there's some cool things that comes out of that too, because people will go now and find a job that maybe pays a little less, that makes them more satisfied overall.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's a cool thing. So I love the trends you gave me, because it's true. Resumes can get ridiculous. Some of that is resume writers out there, every
Yeah.
resume writer out there is going to tell you your resume stinks.
Of
Like,
course.
and
Of
that they
course.
have the magic potion,
Yeah.
like, and then they want their $1,000 or $500 to write their, so
That's
it's a really interesting time, and it's a really like,
I so
um,
when you mentioned being laid off for 3 times, join the
yeah,
club. I've been in similar situations, and I I prepared what I call a cheat sheet. So if I'm sending my resume to a recruiter, or if I get through to an HR interview, I email them with a cheat sheet that shows, hey, last 10 years, this is why I left, or this is why I
it's a good
changed
idea.
jobs. And I put in, like, when you mentioned uh, low oil price or COVID, and I've actually given data. Uh, This is what happened in February of 2021 in COVID, and this is where the market was, and hence I was laid off from the company that I was working for. So
Mm-hmm.
with the resume, there's a cheat sheet. I sometimes submit it up front. When I was looking for jobs and I saw something that interested me, I'm like, okay, this is the job I want to go after. My resume included an additional sheet of paper that showed, okay, if you see the last few years has been a couple of jumps here and there, it's because of these reasons. And I give valid reasons, and I tell them I'm open to discussing each one of these. And you see a valid point why this change happened. So yeah, again, it's connecting. Obviously, software will not parse that. You need to connect with a human to explain your side of the story, and then the
Mm-hmm.
human should be willing to hear your side of the story.
Yeah.
So yeah.
The cool thing is that ultimately, no matter how much technology comes around, that connecting with humans is still extremely valuable.
Oh yes, definitely.
Whether it's professional contacts that can help you along the way, or it's a potential hiring place, or it's just people that can help you along your career.
True.
With all the technology out there, ultimately the human connection is still as, if not the most important part of the whole process. And so there's at least that is a through line
Mm-hmm.
that is happening. So Malay, I really appreciate you being willing to do this. And I appreciate what you said, because it's good to hear it from the other side. And it's
Right.
good to hear, like, it's a difficult process to hire people. And I
It is.
know you have, especially if you have people who have been out of work and need to find work. I'm sure you have that in the back of your mind. You know that they've got a family, they've got all these things, they need to work, but maybe they're just not the right fit. And I can imagine that that's really difficult.
It
If
is.
especially if they're good, but they just got beat by somebody. And it's
The,
good to hear
the,
that.
the saying no is one of the most heartbreaking things I got to do when I come to, hey, for 1 out of 4 saying no. And on the job seekers front, if I may offer a few words, is
Yes, please.
besides the resume, and because that's something that's printed and it's on paper and you make do everything, but make sure, and one of the recruiters had once told me that make sure your accountability and accomplishments show up more than I'm doing this and this for the company, but what are you accountable for? Where does the buck stop in your organization? What is it for which the buck stops at your desk? Right, and that's your accountability. See if you can highlight what you were accountable for. I mean, if you were a clerk, a front desk clerk at a Hilton or a motel, your accountability is to make sure that at the end of the day you make sure there is a night audit, you close the accounts, and you are responsible for that. So that accountability and then the accomplishment that follows that, okay, we had 365 days without any issues with my accountability. Make sure that gets highlighted. And when you get in front of a human, and you guys all do this, but show that enthusiasm and ability to take initiatives while tackling a problem. And it might be outside your fringe role that's been written up in the job description. So make sure it's an end of the day, if a recruiter is hiring is talking to 8 people, how do you make sure that you are the one that person remembers when their work is done? If the HR guys are done with 5:30, they should remember, okay, Brad's the guy I was really impressed with. So unfortunately, it's come down to branding and the interaction part of it. That's something we all need to practice. I also would advise people not only to research about the hiring company, but what industry they are in, what are the challenges facing their industry or their customers' industry. So if you are interviewing with a company that makes wastewater pumps, what are the challenges that company is facing as a manufacturer, and what are the challenges faced by their customers and their industry? So you're showing a deep dive into the role that you're getting into. Not just you're manufacturing, you're making castings for the company, or you're inspecting quality, but how far up can you see within the industry? So it zeroes back into making sure that everybody in the organization sees how they directly or indirectly impact the growth of the company. So you are at the front end of it. This will help you project what you can do for the company by understanding the market trend. So, yeah.
I love that. I think that's a great place for us to park this. But thank you so much for joining me. It was great to see you, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening and weekend, and hopefully we chat again here real soon.
Sure, Brad, and good luck with your job search. I'm sure you'll land up somewhere soon.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Well, that'll do it for this episode of the Job Seeker's Journey podcast. I want to thank Malay for coming on, for his candid answers, and for his friendship over these last 12 years. He is the president of a company called SteerAmerica, which I highly encourage you to look up if you're in that industry, oil and gas specifically. I am always looking for ideas. So if you have an idea for a podcast that you would like for me to do, please feel free to reach out to me. If you know of somebody who would benefit from a podcast like this, please do me a favor and forward this on to them. Tell them that you feel that they would benefit from the information that's coming out. If you're listening on Spotify or anywhere where you get podcasts, please rate it and review it. That helps me get in front of more people. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please join the conversation, make a comment, subscribe, like this episode so that I know that these are episodes that you really want to hear from me on. That'll do it for this episode, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.